The basics of animating Pokemon. Now, first off, this program that I use is called Blender. Now, I'm here to viewpoint shading. Click this circle thing next to the object tab. And if we switch it, we can switch what we see on the model. If we switch it to texture, we suddenly see that everything goes wrong because Mudkip is not magenta, and that's definitely not the texture of a Mudkip. And if we even try rendering it, something goes wrong because we see the model. That's the 3D model. That's correct, but there's no texture, and that's not what we want because that's dumb. Why would you animate a Pokemon model without its texture? Now, I've not found why this happens. At first, I thought maybe it was because I had a Mac, but apparently it happens on Windows as well. I've seen that happen on Windows as well. So I'm still not completely sure why this happens. But apparently, if you do open the models, it seems to work correctly. From my knowledge. So I'm just gonna come here, open recent because I already dealt with this recently, and we get this completely new window. Let me just show you guys how to put this into a better window, because this is definitely not the way we want to edit our model. Now, here's how you change it to the way Blender was originally. Now, I'm just going to drag this down a little bit, and if you see this tab here, it says current editor type. You want to change this from properties to timeline. This was how it was when we first started it. We want to drag that down a little. We're not really going to be using that at all in this part. I'm going to click this corner right here. If we drag it over, we get this double view, so we can see two parts of it, and this will help when we're editing. If you don't want this, if you do this accidentally, what you can do is you can click this, hold, and drag it here. You'll see an arrow, and it will close. However, I do want this, so I'm going to keep it like that. And then I'm going to open another one, but this one's not going to be to actually view and edit the model. It's going to be, we're going to change this from 3D view to properties. Drag that over a little bit because I don't really need that properties tab to be that big. And then we'll click here, drag down, another properties tab opens, but instead we want to change this to outliner. This outlines all the different meshes that are here and that are selected. And yeah, all of these are called meshes, so yeah. Before we start doing anything with the model, before we start editing, before we do anything, go away. Stupid updates, whatever. Sorry. We want to come down here. Want to hit User Preferences. If we click File, User Preferences, come to Input. If you do not have a numpad, you will want to click Edit, Emulate Numpad. What this does is it'll treat your number keys that are under your function keys as your numpad numbers. The reason that this is important is because Blender does treat your number keys and your numpad keys separately. In fact, it doesn't even use your number keys really. So it really just uses your number pad keys. Now, why is this important? Because if we come here and click View, we'll notice that it says Control Numpad 2 and all sorts of stuff. This is the pan to check its different views. Like if we click 8, it'll go up. Click 1, it'll go front side view. 3, it'll show this kind of view, like that. But that is only if we have numpad. If we don't have a numpad, we have to click that setting so that our number keys can be treated as a numpad. So I'm going to click 8 and 6 to move this into a 3D view, sort of. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to keep it a front view for now. And what I'm going to do here is going to come down here to Viewpoint Shading, click Texture. We got it! It looks like Mudkip has been fixed. No more purple texture. This is the pan to check its different views. Like if we click 8, it'll go up, OBJ files. But yeah, as far as I know, this works. Now, we'll notice a problem. If we try to drag the mesh, we'll notice that the mouth and the eyes aren't connected, and that's really creepy because Mudkip without eyeballs is creepy. Yeah, duh. But before we do fix that problem, I'm going to drag this down here. Now, this is completely optional. I oftentimes don't even use this. However, it is kind of cool, and I want to show it off. We come here, and we change 3D view to UV image editing. Let's click this mesh in the back. We'll click the body. We click Tab to go into edit mode. We'll notice that we can also do that by clicking object mode, go to edit mode here, and we get all this. Now, these are all the vertices, these are all the parts that make up Mudkip. We'll notice they're all mapped onto this object, or whatever it is. This is the texture. These are all called UVs. Now, what the UVs do is they map these vertices that are all part of this. They map this texture onto that part. And, so basically, this is how the model has its texture, and that's what's absent from the OBJ file. If we click A to select all, and we click G to move it around, we can change Mudkip's texture! What have you done to him? What is that thing? That looks creepy, and that almost looks like click G to move it around, texture onto that part. And so basically this is how the model has its texture, and that's what's absent from the OBJ file. If we click A to select all, and we click G to move it around, we can change Mudkip's texture! What have you done to him? What is that thing? That looks creepy, and that almost looks like a Torchic, but I'm not even gonna go there, because Mudkip with a beak is actually kind of creepy. It actually did look like a beak, holy cow. So we already know that we can't edit all the UVs, because if we do that, we edit the skin, and that doesn't look like a Mudkip anymore. However, the reason we can use UVs to edit is we can do this. We can select this tab, we click Edit, we click Tab to get into edit mode. We'll notice this thing here. If we click A to select all the vertices, and we click G to grab them, we can move them around. Now I'm angry Mudkip. Now I'm happy. What is that thing? That looks creepy, and that almost looks like a Torchic, but I'm not even gonna go there, because Mudkip with a beak is actually kind of creepy. It actually did look like a beak, holy cow. So we already know that we can't edit all the UVs, because if we do that, we edit the skin, and that doesn't look like a Mudkip anymore. However, the reason we can use UVs to edit is we can do this. We can select this tab, we click Edit, we click Tab to get into edit mode. We'll notice this thing here. If we click A to select all the vertices, and we click G to grab them, we can move them around. Now I'm angry Mudkip. Now I'm happy Mudkip. Now I'm Mudkip with no eyeballs. Now I'm sleepy Mudkip. Now I'm sad Mudkip. Now I'm brock-eyed Mudkip. Or irritated Mudkip. I don't know what that expression is. But this is an optional thing. And the reason I'm showing this now is because once we join all the meshes together, we cannot edit UVs. There was a fix for this on ROE Studios, but that doesn't work anymore. And yeah, I generally don't use this because I don't really want to edit my Pokemon's expression usually. I don't really want that, so I usually leave it like this. So it's up to you guys. You can choose to edit it as you want. Just a warning though, if once you join the meshes, you will not be able to edit UVs again. So be sure it's in the right expression that you want it to be. Now, what I'm going to do here is, now I'll change it to 3D view, 8 and 6, so you can change it to 3D view. You can click A, like I said, select all. That's select all, deselect all button. Or another thing you can do, and this is important because later on you want to do this, you can right click. I should have mentioned this, by the way, I'm sorry I didn't, but you right click to select in this program. You can right click one mesh, then you can shift select another. And you can even do that in the outliner. You can shift select this one as well. So you notice that all three are highlighted, which means that they are all selected. What we want to do here is we want to go to Object, and we want to hit Join, or Control J on your keyboard. That works too. Hit that. We want to move our Mudkip around, and it works as one big object, and that solves our concern. Now, there's only one thing we want to do, and we can't render this. The reason is there are no cameras on scene. We can right click. I should have mentioned this, by the way, I'm sorry I didn't, but you right click to select in this program. You right click, you can want to hit Join, or Control J on your keyboard. That works too. Cameras on select. So I'm gonna pull this camera. No biggie, that was a horrible piece. You can also hit G, you can hit Z. I'm going to click models don't. So if we don't have a model, that's no biggie. We just click Shift A, and we can hit select. And we can, or Shift A to add stuff. We'll get this window. We want to add camera. That'll be situated at the origin. Now, I'm going to click 0. Now, this would, like I said, you have to have emulate numpad for this to work. You can see through, or Shift A to add stuff. We'll get this window. We want to add camera. That'll be situated at the origin. Now, I'm going to click 0. Now, this would, like I said, you have to have emulate numpad for this to work. You can see through the camera. This is what it'll render. So if you hit render, it'll render that, which is actually, that was a horrible place to render. I'm not. That was just a tail, don't worry. That was just a tail. So I'm going to pull this camera back a little, just kind of drag it along these. You can also hit G, you can hit Z to drag it along this Z-axis, X, drag it along X-axis, Y, drag it along this axis. Or we can just hit G and free drag it, whatever. I'm just going to hit this. We'll move it this way, and then what we'll do is we'll click R, we'll click Z to rotate it along the Z-axis. Come on, work. Ah, there we go. Alright, so that's around the area we wanted, and I'll move it a little closer. So I'll hit G, X, and G, Y, kind of move that around there. We can have our Mudkip, we kind of look at click Shift A, and we can hit select, and we can, or Shift A to add stuff. We'll get this window. We want to add camera. That'll be situated at the origin. Now, I'm going to click 0. Now, this would like I said, you have to have emulate numpad for this to work. You can see through the camera. This is what it'll render. So if you hit render, it'll render that, which is actually, that was a horrible place to render. I'm not, that was just the tail. Don't worry. That was just the tail. So I'm going to pull this camera back a little, just kind of drag it along these. You can also hit G. You can hit Z to drag along this Z-axis, X, drag along X-axis, Y, drag along this axis. Or we can just hit G and free drag it, whatever. I'm just going to hit editing type of easier interface. It doesn't appear in texture because the join function seems to texture it out. But I like to have a smooth model when I'm dealing it with in the first place because that's just me. And besides, it's just better to be safe because sometimes it may show when you don't notice. So I'm gonna hit when you go tab into edit mode. All of the vertices are selected. If they're not, you can just hit A to select them all. Come down here to mesh, vertices, remove doubles, and that should solve our problem. Yeah, see, the aisles are gone. This mouth looks a little disjointed. However, it seems more connected to the actual model, and this looks all together more of a single model and looks smooth. So that's all we have to do. Well, the line just come up here. It's just a different position. You can mouse over these to see how everything we do here affects this rendered image. The sun will emit a constant but lamp doesn't. Well, lamps come up here. It's just a different position. You can mouse over these to see what they all do. I'm gonna hit sun, and you'll notice that the texture automatically changes. Now, I'm also gonna come down here, viewpoint to render. This basically shows us the rendered image and how everything we do here affects this rendered image. The sun will emit a constant amount of light, which the amount of light it emits, lighting changes. And because if more here, what we want to do is do, so I can just put my bone back in the center there. This toggles automatically to front camera, but it's okay. Extrude into a so that it has similar legs, right? Because it's a bad thing. But now that we've parented it, and it doesn't seem to have given us any error right now, we can, when we select the armature, we can go from object mode to pose mode. Now, what does pose mode do? It's basically, we can now move this around. Be sure not to grab. If you grab, something like this will happen, and that's bad. Even if you rotate, something like this will happen, and I will go over how to fix that in the next part. Don't worry. It will. This is supposed to happen right now, and this is also supposed to happen. So if we can rotate the face, we'll notice that some parts come apart, and that's a problem. Like I said, we will get to fixing that. We can do some other stuff, like we can wag its tail a little bit. We can do.
So, hello guys, so now we want to animate them. Now that is going to be a bit more tricky, but still not too difficult. So let's get on to animating this model. We're going to need a few more windows to do this. In fact, we're only going to need one more. So if we right click down here, split the area, and if we go to our selector thing here and we choose the dope sheet, this is the area that shows the keyframes for each bone, and the frames that are actually running. Now the frame that we're on is shown down here, as well as down here, and down here, and down here. So if you're not sure what frame you're on, check there, or there, or there, and you'll find out pretty easily. So basically what happens when you animate something is you put a keyframe in on a frame, and then 10 frames later you'll put in another keyframe, and the computer can animate everything in between like that. So let's get on with animating our first action. It's going to be him nodding his head. So quite a simple one. So we want to make an action for him. So if we go down here in the dope sheet, move that in a bit, we go down here in the dope sheet, we can see a thing over here. If we use the scroll wheel while we're hovering over this bit, by the way, we'll scroll left and right. So hit the dope sheet thing here and hit action editor. We are now in the action editor. So if we scroll a bit more, we'll see a list of actions. Or rather, we won't, because we haven't programmed any in yet. But we can make a new one by hitting this button here where it says new. And it'll say action as a default thing. Well, we're going to say our action is going to be him nodding his head once. So we'll set it to nod for nod. Hit enter. Okay, so now let's make sure we're on frame 0 and make sure we're on pose mode. And we want to make sure it records everything that we do on the frame that we do it on. So if we hit down here where it says the record button, automatic keyframe insertion, hit that, and this thing here will pop up. Now we also want to say what we want to record. Now I always put this at available, because basically that means whatever we change it will add a keyframe for. If we don't change it, it won't add a keyframe. If we do, it will. So hit that to available. And we've got everything we need to animate him nodding his head. Except for one more thing which I'm going to say. So you're down here, it says global. Change that. We want it to say gimbal. Now this will change. As you can see, that colour was that, and now it's that. That will change the coordinate system. So it will now follow the bone's movements instead of saying that up is always up, regardless if up for the bone is actually a bit to the left or a bit to the right. First keyframe we want to put in, that's just going to be his head upright. So we just click on the rotation tool once, click on any axis, and as you can see up here, it's made a keyframe. says global. If we don't change it, we want to make sure it records for nod, hit enter. Okay, so now let's make sure we're on frame 0 and make sure we're on pose mode. And we want to make sure it records everything that we do on the frame that we do it on. So if we hit down here where it says the record button, automatic keyframe insertion, hit that, and this thing here will pop up. Now we also want to say what we want to record. Now I always put this at available, because basically that means whatever we change it'll add a keyframe for. If we don't change it, it won't add a keyframe. If we do, it will. So hit that to available. And we've got everything we need to animate him nodding his head. Except for one more thing which I'm going to say. So you're down here, it says global. Change that. We want it to say gimbal. Now this will change, as you can see, that colour was that, and now it's that. That will change the coordinate system. So it will now follow the bone's movements instead of saying that up is always up, regardless if up for the bone is actually a bit to the left or a bit to the right. First keyframe we want to put in, that's just going to be his head upright. So we just click on the rotation tool once, click on any axis, and as you can see up here, it's made a keyframe on frame 1, on frame 0. If it wasn't on frame 0, I'd suggest you put it on frame 0. Now we can grab this keyframe by right clicking it and hitting the G button and moving it around like that. And as you can see, the yellow bar on here, keyframe, follow the bone's movements instead of saying that up is always up, regardless if up for the bone is actually a bit to the left or a bit to the right. First keyframe we want to put in, that's just going to be his head upright. So we just click on the rotation tool once, click on any axis, and as you can see up here, it's made a keyframe on frame 1, on frame 0. If it wasn't on frame 0, I'd suggest you put it on frame 0. Now we can grab this keyframe by right clicking it and hitting the G button and moving it around like that. And as you can see, the yellow bar on here, which denotes keyframe, the yellow bar down there, will move around to on the dope sheet. And you can only do that on the dope sheet, you can't do that on the animation bar in the bottom. But for now, put that on 0 and keep it there. Our next thing that we do when we nod our head is move our head slightly downwards. Now I'm going to say I'm going to do that on frame 15, because he's going to nod his head for about a second. So, we've now set our frame 0 for nod, hit enter. Okay, so now let's make sure we're on frame 0 and make sure we're on pose mode. And we want to make sure it records everything that we do on the frame that we do it on. So if we hit down here where it says the record button, automatic keyframe insertion, hit that, and this thing here will pop up. Now we also want to say what we want to record. Now I always put this at available. Because basically that means whatever we change it'll add a keyframe for. If we don't change it, it won't add a keyframe. If we do, it will. So hit that to available. And we've got everything we need to animate him nodding his head. Except for one more thing which I'm going to say. So you're down here, it says global. Change that. We want it to say gimbal. Now this will change, as you can see, that colour was that, and now it's that. That will change the coordinate system. So it will now follow the bone's movements instead of saying that up is always up, regardless if up for the bone is actually a bit to the left or a bit to the right. First keyframe we want to put in, that's just going to be his head upright. So we just click on the rotation tool once, click on any axis, and as you can see up here, it's made a keyframe on frame 1, on frame 0. If it wasn't on frame 0, I'd suggest you put it on frame 0. Now we can grab this keyframe by right clicking it and hitting the G button and moving it around like that. And as you can see, the yellow bar on here, which denotes keyframe, the yellow bar down there, will move around to on the dope sheet. And you can only do that on the dope sheet, you can't do that on the animation bar in the bottom. But for now, put that on 0 and keep it there. Our next thing that we do when we nod our head is move our head slightly downwards. Now I'm going to say I'm going to do that on frame 15, because he's going to nod his head for about a second. So, we've now set our frame to 15 by just clicking on this dope sheet and moving that so that identifies that as 15. If you're struggling with that, by the way, you can zoom in and out on the dope sheet like that, and you can also move the frames around with the arrow keys on your keyboard. So, frame 15. We're going to select the red axis here, the red one, because that's the forwards and backwards one. And because we're on frame 15, it's going to record what we do next on frame 15. And in this case, I'm going to click that and nod his head. Just like that. That's all we're going to do. And let's just go back and have a look at that. So we're on frame 0. If we hit Alt-A, it will play the animation so far. So Alt-A, he's put his head down. Got to put his head back up again, of course. But we want it exactly where it was before, so it fits in with all the other animations and that kind of thing. So if we right-click the first keyframe, either the top one or the bottom one, doesn't matter because the top one is a summary of everything below. So the top one will copy everything below, the bottom one will just copy that bone. And if we hit Shift-D, we will copy it. And if we move our mouse, as you can see, it'll do that. If you get orange lines like that, that means it hasn't moved. So there's no real point in putting it in, unless that's your point. So let's move that. Let's move the duplicated one. We'll put it on that frame there. Frame 30 as it happens, perfect. Now if we hit Alt-A, if we move to the front and hit Alt-A, head goes down, head goes up. That looks like a decent nod, that does. So that is one nod, very well animated. If we move back, we'll see it a bit better. Let's look at it from several different angles. Alt-A. What a nod. Agreeing with me, yes. Excellent. So now we've just animated the nod of the head action. We're going to want to do another action. And this one is going to be a bit more complicated. It's going to be him waving. So we just delete everything, all the keyframes on this action, by either selecting them all, hitting the A button, hitting delete. Hey, this happens. Don't want that at all. So if we go to pose, if I hit G, I can move it around like that, and we get a lot more ragdollish kind of behaviour. Change the chain length to 3, and we get the shoulder moving in there too. But that's a bit weird. He looks truly fabulous in that one, I guess. So if I right-click off that, and I'm going to change that back to 2 because that was a bit creepy. So now I've got both of those moving there. So for the first frame, as always, it's got to be absolutely clear, no location. Yeah, had a lot of free time for that one. But anyway, yes, if you'd like to see that, make sure you subscribe in the link below. Not interleaving bones or anything. It will do them both at the same time. So
Hi, this is Darren Lyle. Well, now that we've got our character animated, let's do something like take him into Unity and see if we can actually get him running around in a game engine. So let's make sure our character is set up the way we need before we do any importing. If I go into pose mode here and I'm going to hit the A key and select all of the bones, you can see my animation cycles here. So I've got the run cycle up here, and that's from frames 10 to 22 right here. I've also got a walk cycle here. I'm not going to use that in Unity. I'm just going to use the run and the idle. But up here I've got the idle animation, and that's from frames 111 to 141. Now I've just jotted these numbers down on a piece of paper so I have them because I'm going to need to know where the cycles are on the timeline here once I get it into Unity. In addition, what I've done is I've moved all the animation cycles up again, like I did at the beginning of the walk cycle video, I believe. I've moved them all up 10 frames, and then at frame 1, I've taken them back to the default T-pose. And this too, Unity will need to compare it to the T-pose in its animation system. So having it in a T-pose like this is going to be really helpful. And also what I've done just for housekeeping sake is I've deleted the outer eyes that we created because we aren't going to need that in Unity. And I've also deleted the shoelaces. Those were just so polygon saved and created, and I'm going to save the scene. All right, well, let's scene exporter, so as is. Next, the rig. The only thing I need to change here is the animation type. I'm going to change this from generic to humanoid. And this will attempt to use Unity's fairly new Mechanim animation system. And let's see if this works. I'm just going to hit apply here. Complex prior. And this is where we can set up our animations. Now, it is seen that I've got a frame range from 0 to 144 here. And it's attempted to give me a couple clips here. These, of course, aren't going to do. So I'm going to have to redo these clips. So what I'm going to do is this first animation clip that's been titled default take, I'm just going to rename that to idle. And that 11, I'm going to go ahead and clip, run in a loop. And I'm going to go ahead and select all of these just to see how it works. You can always go back and deselect these and reapply it. So I'm going to just take the way you tumble is you hold the Alt key down and then left mouse button click. And then to pan, you hold the Alt key down and middle mouse button click and drag. And to zoom, you hold the Alt key down and right mouse button click and drag. So there is our character. If we hit the play button, we can see that there's our character. We can see his feet. Big deal, huh? The eyes, the character, put the idle in player, controller. If we go idle animation to our scene now, animation clip, and drag it into the animator. And here is our first animation. And again, to turn. So
a keyframe over here using the IK, but moving some parts of the model with an IK can be a little tricky. Some using the IK access. So I'm going to keyframe all these tail set on X-ray. I have the thing set to record any keyframes that I will make or any changes in the bones, and I have the dope sheet up here. So we are pretty much ready to animate. All I gotta do is turn on pose mode, and then we can animate. So the thing I want to animate is I want to make Charizard's tail move back and forth. So I'm going to keyframe all these tail. So the next thing I'm about to teach you is probably one of the most important things you need to know if you're going to make smooth animations and save a bunch of time, and that's IK constraints. So, getting it set up here real quick, we can right click this bone, it'll select the skeleton, we'll go over to the armature settings, and then we'll turn X-ray on so we can see the skeleton, and then we'll go into pose mode so we can move each individual bone around. So we can either use this rotation tool, which is down here, the rotation tool, the slider tool. I'll keep on the rotation tool for now. And we can move each of these bones around in any way we want to, just making them not look weird, like, say, you get my point. Anyway, if we, let's say we want to animate something, but we don't want to spend all this time animating all these bones around individually. Well, IKs will help us save a bunch of time, so you will notice that there's this button over here when you are in pose mode and you have the skeleton selected called Auto IK. If we select this and then we grab a bone in a chain, say the tail, the bone in the arm, and we grab it with right click and then move it around, it'll now move all of the chains, all the bones in a particular chain. So for instance, this arm, it'll now move all of those individually. The tail, it'll move all of those as well. So for instance, this arm, it'll now move all of those individually. The tail, it'll move all of those as well. All of those individually. The tail, it'll move all of those as well. And that will save us a bunch of time. Move all the bones in a particular chain. So for instance, this arm, it'll now move all of those individually. The tail, it'll move it to the right or left, back and forth, so on and so forth. Understand anything I go over quickly in this video, I recommend you check out my previous 2 tutorials. You'll probably find the answer there. And of course, if you have any questions for this video, just ask me in the comments and I'll try to give you my best answer. But for right now, I've imported the X and Y Eevee model. I've scaled it up just to make viewing it easier. But besides that, we're basically going to be starting from scratch, so let's make a walk cycle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the armature, which is the skeleton here. Go over to the armature settings and turn X-ray on so we can see it. And then I'm going to change the display above here from the default setting to stick. So the reason that is because since I've done my last two tutorials, I've updated my version of Blender to 2.78, and in this latest update of Blender, it's made it kind of hard to select smaller objects like these small bones that are in the X and Y models a lot of the time. But changing it to stick will make them easier to see and easier to select because they have a little dot where they are. So that's why I'm changing it to stick. So next I'm going to go over to create over.
Hey guys, I recently got a request to do a tutorial on the rig that I had set up in my walk cycle animation tutorial. So this is what the rig looks like, and let me just show you what it is capable of quickly. So if we just have a look over here, it's a very simple rig, and it can be displayed even simpler. You see here, it's just very few bones that you actually work with. These bones here are IK bones, so you can control the entire limb simply with one bone and then an additional bone for pointing the knee or elbow, as the case may be. And also, it's very easy to set up crouching. It's this sort of thing. So yeah, it's a very simple rig, but it's also quite effective, and it literally takes about 5 minutes to set up once you know what you're doing. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this rig. So this is the starting file here, which you can download from a link in the description if you don't have a character that you want to test this out with. So just starting off, let's just have our cursor positioned at the center of the screen, just with Shift-C to get it there. And I just quickly want to enable screencast so that you can see what buttons I'm pressing. Might be helpful. Okay, I can see it shows up on the side there. So let's press Shift-A and go down to Armature and add in a single bone. Oops, I missed that. Single bone. Okay, now if we just go in edit mode and drag this up to just about there, and we can also go into the armature properties just on the side panel here, and we can enable X-ray so that it displays through the mesh. Now we're going to drag this up to the chest area here and extrude once more to the base of the neck. And then you can have a neck bone if you like, but I'm just going to go straight up to the head over here. And from side view, I will just bring this to about the center. Okay, now I'm going to click to position my cursor about the shoulder, and Shift-A in edit mode will just automatically add in a new bone, and we can drag this out to the elbow and out once more to the hand, and we'll just do the same thing with the leg, down to the knee, down to the bottom of the leg, and then just out to form a foot bone. So let's just reposition this to the center of the leg and do the same thing with the arm. Okay, now we want to set up the knee, position my cursor about the shoulder, and Shift A in edit mode will just automatically add in a new bone, and we can drag this out to the elbow and out once more to the hand, and we'll just do the same thing with the leg, down to the knee, down to the bottom of the leg, and then just out to form a foot bone. So let's just reposition this to the center of the leg, and we'll just do the same thing with the leg, down to the knee, down to the bottom of the leg. And then just out to form a foot bone. So let's just reposition this to the center of the leg and do the same thing with the arm. Okay, now we want to set up the control IK bones that you saw in the introduction. So we're going to have them coming out of the wrist here and the ankle here. So we'll just select that and press E to extrude the bones out, just like that. Now we don't actually want these bones to be connected, so we'll select both of them, Alt P and clear parent, and you can see that now they are separate. And we can just add in a bone over here and over here. These will be our pole targets, as they're called, which basically just means that the elbow and the knee will point towards each of these bones respectively. So we have the basics set up now, and we can just go through and name all our bones quickly. So I'm going to turn on names, and as you can see they've all been given default names, just bone.001 going up. If we go into the bone properties, however, we can rename each of them. So this is our head, this is our chest, stomach, etc. So this is quite an important thing to do. It's more important obviously on a larger rig where you have facial controls and all sorts of fancy stuff, but it is just generally good practice to name all your bones. So just go through and do that. That's the lower arm. Oops. This is the upper leg, the lower leg, the foot, and I can just call this knee, elbow, This is the arm IK, and lastly the foot IK, or rather leg IK actually. Now we also want to be able to differentiate between the left side and the right side. So what I'd like to do is just append .l to all of these quickly. Should have done that when I was naming them initially, but just sort of slipped my mind. It shouldn't take too long, however. Okay, so now everything on the left-hand side has got a .l to signify that it is on the left. And before we copy everything over onto the right-hand side, there's a few things we want to change. On each of these bones here, the elbow and the IK bones, we want to turn off this deform property in the bones panel. So basically this means that when we apply the armature to the mesh, these bones won't be given any weight, so basically they won't directly modify the mesh, because all these bones are just going to be repositioning other bones which will be transforming the mesh. So we'll just toggle this off. I think I got all of them. Right, and also we want to be able to just rotate the foot with this IK bone here, just so that we can do everything we need on this leg just with a single bone. So if we select the foot and then the IK and just say Control P and keep offset, now when we rotate it, it rotates the foot with it. And also let's quickly set up the IK constraint. So the way we do this is we select the bone that we want to control the whole thing, and then we select the bone with Shift that we want to actually apply the the constraint to, which will be this this last